Zaxby's, indescribably good.
Well, good evening, Raider fans, and welcome back to an extended version or an addition to what is usually a Rocky Hidalgo show. But today we thought we'd take a little bit of a different spin here and introduce what I would call, Rocky, one of our Walton super fans. Kevin Taylor has been around in the program for over 13 years. He started off, I guess, watching a lot of Wheeler football, but then progressed and moved up the ranks and started watching Walton football. And according to our history here, Kevin, you have a record of 147. 100 wins and 47 losses of your years of watching Walton football, which is almost good enough to get you elevated to be the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. But if your record was 47 and 100, they'd ask you to be the coach of the Saints. But tell us a little bit about how you got to become a Walton football fan the way you are, what you do, and coming every Friday night, and just how all of that started.
Yeah, sure. My daughter graduated from Walton in 2002. I have 3 kids. My youngest is only 2 years removed from Walton.
Right.
But she was starting over at Dodgen, and so to get her involved with a lot more kids and do a lot more things, we felt it important to get her engaged in other things, and so she started coming over to all the games. So her 8th grade year, we started coming to all the games that year. And then starting in 9th grade, she did sports med. She did sports med all 4 years here at Walton, and actually went to college to do sports med, and then changed her major. So that kind of introduced us into it. And I just love college sports, and high school sports and the competition, whether it be football, but I just love football. Just something about the magic of Friday night football, and being in Raider Valley, it's just a great experience.
Now, you and your wife, Cheryl, have been married 33 years, and one of the questions that everybody in the studio asked was, how do you get your wife to continue going to high school football games with you after 33 years? So what is the magic recipe there?
Part of it was we've been conditioned with sports with my wife all along. She really liked sports, but I used to play a lot of competitive softball. We played, 60, 90 games a year.
Right.
So it just became ingrained in us and our family, taking our kids, so all the kids would be there. It just became part of what we do. And so she's missed more games than I have, but for the most part, she's missed probably about 8 or 10 games in that time frame.
Rocky, what does it mean to a program like Walton to have supporters like Kevin who have been here through coaching changes, different teams, different players? What does that mean to you as a coach, and what do you think it means to the kids as a whole?
Well, it's we preach to the kids about we want people to be a Raider for 40 years, not for 4. And that's kind of what we're trying to push here in the community. We want Friday nights in Raider Valley to be like those South Georgia and small towns where everybody in East Cobb comes to Raider Valley on Friday night to watch our football team. Right. Not because it brings more money into the school or anything like that, just because it's a great place to be on Friday night, and it just adds to the atmosphere. And there are a ton of people who are just like Kevin, who show up at the games on Friday night, and they've come for years, and I hear from them. We hear from them from time to time, and they come in, they come, go, and then come back, and so it's neat, and we're just glad that we have people that support us in that way, and good, bad, or indifferent, that show up on Friday night and cheer on the Raiders.
Yep. Now, Kevin, you sent your 3 children through Walton High School, but what is the thing that sticks out to you, or if people ask you, well, Kevin, what is it about Walton? I hear about it, very successful programs across the board, both academically and athletically. But if people ask you on the street, what is it about Walton to you, Kevin? How do you answer that?
The thing about Walton is it's about being the best you can be. It's ingrained, whether it's academically, sports, to always do your best, no matter what. Even if your best isn't as good as the next guy, if you give it your best. And saying I've talked with my kids, I don't care if we're playing tiddlywinks. We want to win. It doesn't matter what the sport, what we're doing, we want to win.
Right.
And at all costs, not all costs, but we want to win.
Most costs.
Most costs. Yeah. So it's an important thing to win, and that instills something in you down the road in your life and in business, that competition is important. If you want to set yourself apart from the guy next to you, how are you going to do that? You do that with passion and wanting to win and be the best you can be. And maybe you keep your job and the guy next to you doesn't. I mean, it's a reality today, right?
Well, that's one of the things that, we do tell the kids, and you can tell high school seniors, Rocky, or whether it be seniors in college, that in the real world they keep score every day. They keep score every day, and it is important. Now, Kevin, with you here, I think we want to get into some of the stories or some of the things, but talking about players, talking about some big games and memories that you have, and anything that any fond memories you may have about Coach Hidalgo. I have a couple before he became the head coach. Kevin, what are some of your early memories of when you were here? Coach Dudley was the head coach, and when you started watching Walton football.
There's been quite a few. There's been some really great guys, really great kids. A lot of the coaches are still the same coaches. There's only one or two different. Rocky is a prime example. But there was a kid here who was running back. Had a nose. He was a small guy for a running back, but he had a nose for the ball and how to run, and that was Pace-Stead. He could play. He went on to play at Air Force, but he just was really good, had a nose for the ball, and in some respects he reminds me, Jim Hogue this year reminds me a little bit of Pace-Stead. He just has that something about him something about him. Now, Jim's a little bit, a little different type runner than Pace was, but just something about him, right?
Yeah, that's interesting because one of the things that Jim has is you're very, they're two very similar runners in the fact that they've got great vision. They just kind of have a nose for finding the seam. Pace was probably one of the 3 or 4 toughest players we've ever had here at Walton High School. He was hard as nails. I mean, the guy wasn't 5'6". But, gosh, he started for us a freshman, and, very few freshmen have played at Walton High School over the last 15 years, and I think he's probably the only one. He was an incredible player for us for 4 years, but, gosh, he was tough. I mean, I could go in the stories about that kid right there on Friday night. He was a great leader for our football team, but, my gosh, he was just a tough kid. He would just pour it in there, and guys twice his size would come in there and slam into him, and he could break tackles and keep his feet, and like you said, he just found ways to get yards.
Kevin, is running back maybe that position that sticks out the most to you in terms of Walton players over the last 13, 15 years?
No, not really. There's just so many really good players. One of them, there's one defensive guy, one of the best hitters I've ever seen here is Joe Gaston. He could lay the wood on you, and he would. And his college career, he got hurt a lot, but he was behind a really good player, Chris Reese. But he just really hit. Another kid, Jamie Hallen, ran a play. I don't know what it's really called. I call it the Dudley Deke. But where they go in and the H-back comes across and fakes. That he did that play really, really well. Probably one of my favorite plays of all time, Valdosta playoffs. I'm sitting beside Blake Ballou, who's a buddy of my buddy's brother-in-law. And he was a quarterback at Valdosta and went on to play at Georgia. And so Justin Forte breaks around the right corner, got the ball flying down the right side. A kid was faster than him, which I was stunned at, ran him down, punched the ball out. It pops out about 5 yards in front of him, pops up, didn't break stride, ran in for a touchdown. One of the best plays I've ever seen.
Yeah, Justin and that same player, they ran beside each other at the state track championships. They were in lane like 6 and 7 at the state track championships, which was kind of cool. That was one of those things that was a game that we were just meant to win when something like that happens to for your football team. I'll tell you, you mentioned Joe Gaston. I had the pleasure of coaching Joe Gaston my first year as the defensive coordinator, and gosh, he was one of those kids that just made plays. As a sophomore, he had like 11 sacks. His senior year, I think he had 4 or 5 interceptions. He was a kid, and he was a physical kid. That man, he could do so much. He made at South Cobb. He made an interception at South Cobb that Kenny McKinley, who's the guy who played at South Carolina and unfortunately died recently, tried to throw a pass over his head, and Joe jumped about 11 feet in the air and snatched it out of the air with one hand. One of the most impressive plays I've ever seen on a football field. But you've got an eye for talent because all those guys are really good players for us. And Jamie Hallen was a 3-year starter for us, and as good a kid. And people talk about team leaders. He was an exceptional team leader for us, with some great football teams over there. Started as a sophomore, and it's guys like that have allowed us to win a lot of football games, and honestly allowed our coaching staff to hang around here for 10 years. Because if we hadn't had them, we wouldn't have won as many, and everybody wouldn't want us here. You know, that is what it is.
And there's just a couple more that I got to say something about, and it's Chase Thomas at defensive end. What a player. David Paulson, who's now at Oklahoma State. He's, two really quality players, have just done a lot for it. And also my son-in-law happens to be a defensive player, was Nick Rosner, number 99. He's my son-in-law. So
I did not
surprise.
know that. I did not know that. That is a surprise. Nick was, we have a joke around here. Coach Imperial still gives me a hard time because he says that Nick was probably the player I yelled at the most in the past 15 years. Nick was a very good player for us. He was a typical Walton football player. When I say that, he was an undersized defensive tackle. He was about 195 pounds his junior year, about 210 pounds his senior year, but he was a great player. He played with a lot of passion, a lot of heart, just got in there and fought. I mean, I can't tell you how many times the guy lined up against 270, 280-pound guys and just kicked people's butts. And it's guys like that, those 210-pound guys who go out and compete and exceed the level of execution and effort that our opponents have put out there that have allowed us to be good over the years. And Nick is indicative of Walton football in a lot of ways. And then the other guy, Chase Thomas, is for me, I've been here 15 years. He's probably the best football player we've had here in 15 years, and that's not because he's going out and doing great things at Stanford. He was an exceptional player. I mean, just from a talent, it's rare that you have a kid with such talent, such drive, determination, and as savvy a player as him. He's the smartest football player I've ever coached. I used to get on to him because he'd make the defensive checks from a three-point stance at the defensive end position, and I would tell him that's not his job. You shut up, that's not your job. But when you have a guy like that, you really just let him do it. It was kind of a big joke between me and him in practice, but in the game, you let guys like that play, and you let him do that because he was like having a coach on the field. He was an exceptional player. I'm proud to have coached a kid like that. And there are more along the years, the last 15 years, that were similar and in that mold. But he really was a special player. Kyle Westman was a kid who was very similar to him in a lot of ways. That just meets and exceeds any standard that you can put on a young man. And they're more than that. There's quite a few more than that. And that's been the fortunate thing about coaching at Walton High School, that the quality of character of the kids that we get to work with as coaches, beyond the football field. They're great young men. They're leaders in the community, and it makes the job really worthwhile.
Absolutely.
Kevin, let's do a little bit of rapid fire here. A couple of quick questions came up from some of our guys in the booth over there. You mentioned the Valdosta win. Talk about a couple of games that just stick out in your mind. Big wins over the years.
Well, there's one that's not so much a big win. We wind up losing the game, but there's one particular sequence, and I'm sure Coach here will have something to say about it, but it had lost to Cherokee in the playoffs when they had a first down on about the 1 yard line, and we stuffed them, and they wind up not scoring. That was a great sequence.
Yeah, I mean, anytime with Cherokee at that time, they had, they had a great football team. One of the best coaching staffs. I think they've got that staff has had 4 head coaches on it now. Guys have gone on to head coaching, but they had a couple of incredible football players. The quarterback, Robert Jarvis, and the tailback, Ashton Foster. And gosh, that was probably the most physical football game I've ever been involved with. And that was one of those games. Ashton Foster, he was a great player. Outside of Jonathan Dwyer, the best player, the best running back I've ever coached against. Right. And I remember after the game, we lost the game. I didn't think we played well on defense. And I went back and watched the video, and we hit him so many times in the backfield and at the line of scrimmage. But he was just such a great player that he just fell forward for 3 yards. We could never get him, in a third and long, because he would get, it was 2nd and 7, it was 3rd and 4, and they went for it 10 times on 4th down and got 8 of them. The next year they came back and went for it 10 times and only got 2. We beat them the following year, the year before they beat us. That was one of the greatest games I've ever been involved with. Unfortunately, we lost the game, but gosh, it was a physical test. I mean, that was 2 very good football teams that just knocked the fire out of each other for 4 quarters.
Is Jonathan the best player you've ever coached against? or most visibly? Because I mean, that game, I mean, Bill Perry talks about it in one of his where, Jonathan had 374 yards, 5 touchdowns, things of that sort. He was amazing.
He had 189 yards rushing and had about 150 called back, and because of holding penalties. Jonathan Dwyer or Jermaine Phillips. My first year, we played Roswell, and Jermaine Phillips was a starting safety for them. And the guy, we were running the buck sweep. We were a wing T team, and our guards would pull out and try to block him. And I swear he was throwing hand grenades at them. It was there where he was just littering the field with little Walton Raiders all over the place. It was like nothing I'd ever seen. It was the first time I'd ever coached against a guy who would go and play in the NFL.
Right.
And it is so evident
Absolutely.
as a coach, those guys – you can spot him on tape and you can say, oh, he's one.
Yeah.
And it was from the first play, you could tell he was special and different. And he was a great player. Those two are it's hard to think of anybody else that would exceed those two. Those are to my knowledge right now, or what I can recall immediately. Those are the two best.
Kevin, who's the opponent or the game that you look forward to the most each year? Has it changed over the years?
Yeah, it really does. It really has more to do with competition. There used to be a lot of rivalry between Walton and Wheeler, and that's not so much the case anymore. The downturn in their football program and the upsweep with ours. But it really gets down to me, the playoffs and the Lassiter game. Pope may, somewhat, but it's really the Lassiter game that really get up for every year. It's just one of those games that you just really want to win.
It's funny because when I think about, when Adam was in school, it was Roswell back then. I mean, the region was one we kind of handled, but Roswell was that game. It was always that game you were looking for, and they always had lots of running backs.
Right, and Roswell always have, and it was very enjoyable when we beat them 6-0 with 2 50-plus yard field goals. I don't remember what year that was.
It's always, that's one of the reasons we kept Roswell on the schedule, because it's always a great game when we get together. And that's two of the best programs in Metro Atlanta, and they're not going anywhere. We split on the freshman level this year. We played twice, and we had a Donnybrook on the JV level. I mean, 2 excellent football teams. I think our 8th graders play their 8th grade team this year. That rivalry is not going anywhere. I love to play Roswell because it's a great game. Their kids get after our kids get after theirs. And it's, as a coach, games like that your kids are going to show up and play for are the best ones to coach in, because you don't have to worry about, are we going to play well? And when you kind of get up on a team and you've beaten a team over the course of a few years, it does kind of get to the point, we're just going to beat these guys. And when I first came in '96, Wheeler was the thing.
Right.
Absolutely.
And we beat them 28-0 in '96. They'd beaten us 11 straight times, and I know their kids feel like our kids did in '96. And I remind our kids when we take the field every year, guys, I've been on the other side of this, and they're waiting over there for us to slip up because it'll make their season. And it's always like that, But those games that that you're going to have a great, a great contest, those are the ones I get excited for.
Kevin, any loss, a painful loss? You mentioned that Cherokee playoff loss, which I think was more shocking and surprising to all of us. The pain probably came a little bit later, but we were all walking off that field going, I just can't believe we didn't win. But the ones that always stick in my mind are some of those excruciating ones. We're like, how did that happen on that last play or something like that? What game sticks out in your mind from that perspective?
Central Gwinnett, without a doubt. It is.
That was in my top 3.
it was right there with it, and it's like, that was our game, and it wasn't in the cards for us that time, but we were the best team on that field.
Yeah,
I can still see the punt snap.
We snapped. For those of you at home who don't know that game, the Raiders were up 24-3, I think, at halftime, and ended up losing the game 27-24, and it was just everything. The wheels fell off in the second half. We snapped a punt over our head, gave them the ball. When the game was, all we had to do was punt the ball away, and we win the game.
Right.
On 3rd and 12, they threw a halfback pass, and I just remember that we were in the perfect coverage on 3rd and 12, and they threw a halfback pass, and we covered and everything, and it was like our kids the guy just went up and caught the ball, and everybody kind of stood around going, I can't believe they threw a halfback pass on 3rd and 12, and I can't believe it worked. And then at the end of the game, we're driving, we've got the lead. All we need is a first down. and we run a play and get the first down, and we've got a procedure penalty, and we end up having to go instead of being 3rd and 1, it ended up being 3rd and 6, and we ended up not getting the first down, and we had to punt the ball away, and just everything kind of went downhill from there. And that was one of those games, and they had 2 great players, 2 great backs. One of them, Bo Johnson, is playing at Oklahoma State, and he was a kid all year long. We saw them on tape that really just turned it up a notch when their team needed it. And I'll give their kids credit, is he was a different kid in the second half. He ran, he was fierce the way he ran the football, and he's a kid that really had just a desire to win the game. And that was the other thing. He really came back, and I give him credit. The way he played in the second half allowed them to get back in the football game.
Yeah, and the reward was to go down to Lowndes and get trounced the next week. So we had 2 trips to the Dome in the semifinals, Kevin. What about those 2 years? I mean, they were magical years in a lot of different respects. But one of the things Rocky and I talked about earlier in one of the shows was practicing at Thanksgiving is a big deal. If you're going to the Dome, either in the past when it was the semis or now in the finals, you're practicing at Thanksgiving. What about the playoffs and semifinals and things like that?
Yeah, I believe that playoff, the last one was in the Dome was 2004, I believe.
Seven.
Yeah, seven. Sorry, yeah.
In North Gwinnett in 2007.
Right. Oh, that's right. Yeah, and it's I don't know. It's very enjoyable to go into the Dome, but it's a different vibe. It's a different feel going to the Dome. It's great you're there, and I really want to be in the playoffs. It would really be great to have it here, though, but that didn't happen. The games are there at the Dome, and I don't know. The games just have a different vibe. Even if you go watch a different game, it just feels different. Doesn't quite feel like a high school football game. It's just a little bit different. It was a terrible loss, and all losses are bad. But when you get in the playoffs to lose, everybody's got to lose. But it's just one of those things that's can get you down. But you got to bounce up and do the best you can.
John Madden always talks about the finality, Rocky, and it gets worse as you go further.
Mm-hmm.
Because I will never ever forget watching Chase and Adam and Braden and those guys walk off that bus. The finality of losing that close to that dream. It's even worse in the championship game. Mm-hmm. As a coach, it's got to affect you the same way.
It does. The interesting thing about that team is, that team really played so far above really who they were. I mean, I think that team beat 3 teams that were more talented than they were. That team had so much heart and so much passion, and God, man, they just played so hard and they just kind of overcame things. But when you get down there and you've given so much, and you go down there and you play a North Gwinnett team that was a very good football team, but North Gwinnett played their best game of the season that night against us. They played perfect against us. And it was just one of those things that sometimes, it's all about timing. It's last Friday night. We played our best game. We played a near perfect game versus Woodstock, and I'm sure their coaches would love to play that game again because they didn't play their best, and it's kind of how I feel about how we did against Etowah. It's but you got to show up and play well every night, and when you get in the playoffs, everybody's you've got a tough opponent every week, and when it's over with, it's over with. I mean, it is, and you're right. Those kids have given everything, and they've laid it on the line for each other. When that buzzer sounds, if they're not on top, somebody's hurting.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah. It's hard. Well, folks, this has been terrific. Spending some time with Kevin and with Rocky and just talking football. And I guess a couple of things I would just say. One, we always need your support at Walton. People like Kevin are just an indication of how much this program means to so many people. And we need everybody's support. Rocky, I know that that's one of the things we probably take a little bit for granted around Walton, the kind of support we get. The second thing is, old football players never forget plays. Whether you're a coach or, we could probably get the guys here in the room and talk about, the plays that we remember from high school and college and things like that. So it's a word of warning to the mothers. But, if your sons are going to play football and they're going to be coaches, they're never going to forget any of the plays. And as they get older, it gets worse, as the 3 of us have definitely shown. Yeah. But, folks, this has been another special edition, an extended version of one of the Rocky Hidalgo coaches shows. And with special guest Kevin Taylor, superfan from Walton High School. We look forward to getting you up here one day to be one of our Walton superfans.